This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
We are back with Dr. Lisa Jaynes Johnson. Lisa Jaynes Johnson, that is. She's in private practice as a family therapist and is here again to talk more about her memoirs that are titled My Relationship with Oprah, My Own Super Soul Evolution to Restorative Justice. If you haven't heard any of her podcasts, I suggest you watch and listen to them because she has been helping so many for years and all that she's undergone and went through. And she just can really empathize with so many of you and can help you. Now, for today, we're going to talk a little bit about how Lisa applies the recovery principles to creating her own family, right? So, yeah, in our last interview, you described seeking a spiritual solution to, well, her physical and emotional problems with food, applying these recovery principles to, well, her work as a family therapist. Lisa also described how her parents and her sister, Edie, provided resilience factors and a recovery path that supported her life and work. And Lisa was also motivated to move to New Mexico by her first miscarriage and suffered another loss on the way to start her new life in another state, but not before struggling through unemployment and fear. And it was after she met a hitchhiker who was studying a course in miracles did she release the fear and trust in that higher power that would guide her through the next chapters of her life. And it was the 12-step programs and healthy habits that she learned along the way that gave her that support that she needed and that resilience to help overcome change in direction for her career. And it was also losing her job in Santa Fe that led her to the University of New Mexico's College of Education. My goodness. So, how did the shift in your career focus guide your evolution, Lisa?
Well, one of the things about if you look at the 12-step program, there's different sections of the
Mm-hmm.
process that you go through. The first part is admitting that you have power, you're powerless over your addiction and your life became unmanageable and you need to ask for help from others. And then steps 4 through 9 involve taking your own inventory, taking a look at your patterns, your behavior in the past, learning places, the things that you need to change about yourself, and then making amends and changing those patterns. So when you get to steps 10, 11, and 12, those are considered maintenance steps. The 10th step is continuing to take personal inventory, and when you're wrong, promptly admit it. 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with your higher power. And then 12 is to carry the message to others. And I certainly did apply that in my life throughout my recovery. Remember, I became a therapist after joining the 12-step program and used a lot of the principles I was using as a therapist to help people change their behavior and also change it in my own life. And so to carry the message and to seek through that through prayer and meditation, when I saw that relationship with a higher power and I was moving to New Mexico and moving to another state and changing my life and learning to trust that there was, it was pretty profound to me that I got I when the day I it was the nicest getting fired I've ever had, but being released from my position for being too educational in my therapeutic approach. The same day I applied for the job at the University of New Mexico, which is where I ended up teaching that following fall and led to
Amazing.
several years of stability through my time there.
When
So
one door closes, one door opens, they say, Dr. Lisa, right?
exactly. But I had to trust that door was going to open, and that's where I used that steps 10, 11, and 12 to help me to turn to that power, turn to that meditation, and trust that there is something else, coming along the way.
Beautiful. Well, in the last interview, you said that you applied to teach, as you just mentioned, the University of New Mexico. This is on the day. I can't believe that, that
The
this
day
is
I was
amazing.
fired, yeah.
Oh my God. It's fascinating. So tell me a little bit about what the job was specifically and how many years you were there for.
So the job I applied for was in the same department that I had gotten where I would, the same department that I would have gotten in my master's program in my other university. I got my master's at Northern Illinois University. So University of New Mexico had the same department. And my class was marriage and family relations, which is the first freshman, sophomore level family introduction to family studies course. It's all the freshmen who are going to study family studies come in through this door to learn what the profession is about. And family studies is unique in the sense that it is the study of families, like all the different ways you can look at families. It's a multidisciplinary field. So we look at people through the perspective of therapy, through development, through childbirth, through parenting, through politics, through healthcare, through legal issues, through public health issues. There are so many things that impact families, economics, the education system, and what we do as a family studies profession is study how all of those different systems impact families. So it is a multidisciplinary approach, and it broadened my perspective. And teaching that undergrad study just gave me a foot in the door to the university that led to a job at the Manzanita Child Development Program. Now, at University of New Mexico, that was a classroom of 25 to 30 kids from 2 years old to 5 years old, with 3 or 4 teachers together at a time working with this group of children. So I'd get a kid who was 2 years old
Oh,
and stay with him until he went to kindergarten. As a matter of fact, I bought a house in Albuquerque, and it just so happened the week that I bought the house, the next door neighbor's grandson joined the program that I was at, the Manzanita Child Development Program. So I got to see him grow up from 2 years old to 5 years old. And then, of
oh,
course, as I continued throughout the years living at that same house for 22 years, got to see him go through middle school, high school, college, go to law school. And yeah, it was fascinating to watch his whole life develop before me. But
amazing.
that full-time position at Manzanita started that position. I had applied for the job as assistant teacher, and 2 weeks
Hmm.
after I got the job as assistant teacher, the head teacher quit. And so I became acting head teacher
Wow.
because I was the most highly qualified. But you know what? I had never been a teacher. I didn't go to school to become a teacher. I went to school to become a therapist. Even though I was educational in my therapeutic approach, I was a therapist. But this environment, working with children from 2 to age, with college educated professors and students, faculty and staff, bringing their children to this program because they care about their kids' development, was quite a healing space for me for those several years that I worked there after working with families with child abuse and incest, kids being taken away from their parents. So it was very restorative for me at the time. And while I was going through that, I went through those years of experiencing the more severe losses of my pregnancy, the tubal pregnancies.
Ah,
So that resilience that before I left Chicago, that home, that foundation that I had, it really restored my faith in loving families to work with these families in the Child Development Center, similar to what I did in grad school, so that I
ah,
could really restore my hope about that, parents really love their children. They really, really do. By the way, most parents really, really love their children and want what's best for them. And it's nice to remember that every once in a while, or all the time,
no,
actually.
it is. It is. And thank you for sharing. I know it's all hard. You mentioned the tubal pregnancies and also your husband had suicidal depression as well.
So not only did I get a job working at the University of New Mexico, but my husband, who had completed his master's degree in library science, got a position at the University of New Mexico as well. So we both were staff, members of the community, and really, because I was a staff member, you get one of the benefits is to get you get up to 8 credit hours per semester for free that you can take towards any degree you want. So since I worked for the university and I was a full-time staff member at member at the Child Development Program, over the next few years, I took one class at a time towards my PhD. In the meantime, I had two tubal pregnancies. One of
Ah,
them was the first one was I was bleeding internally. I knew I was pregnant. I'd always known within days of conception that I was pregnant. And so I took a pregnancy test and it was positive, but I was had cramping so bad.
ah,
I went to the doctor that day and when they examined me, they said, go immediately to the emergency room. I was bleeding internally. I had to have emergency surgery. Otherwise, that first tubal pregnancy would have killed me. And so that was not a great experience with my third attempt to have a baby. In the meantime, my husband was applying for positions, promotions, advancement at his position at the university library and getting passed over for positions that other people were being accepted in. And that repeated disregard for his skill and ability fed some of his early childhood depression that I didn't know existed before we got married, but certainly did emerge over the years. So while I was losing pregnancies, he was thinking about contemplating suicide, and I was spending several years taking him to and from hospitals to make sure that he got the help that he needed for his depression. I was in the 12-step program. I also went to Al-Anon to help me with his depression, dealt with some of my substance abuse issues and Narcotics Anonymous. I used that 12-step program a lot to help me through all these different positions. You know, when you go to Al-Anon, it's powerless over addiction and my life has become unmanageable. But I felt like I was going because I was powerless over my husband's disease of depression, which applied well to using those steps and principles to help me to recover and to restore and to uh, put together the principles that I was learning in classes with the recovery principles with the loving environment, working with children as we tried to continue to find our own path to parenthood. While I was studying family studies, I would just study whatever it was that was going on in my life. So I tended to do things like studied fathers and fathering or studied uh, infertility issues for family members who were going through the things. I used my education to educate me about the things I was going through in my life, just like I had in my undergrad program when I was recovering from the assault and learning how to what happens when people do that. How do people recover there?
thank you for sharing that. Well, also,
Sure.
let's talk about, I guess, your continued evolution, right, of restorative justice. And how did this, guide your approach to the return of your own criminal case? And for those that may not know, could you just tell us a little bit about that as well?
So after several years of working in the Child Development Center, the Manzanita Center, and applying for the head teacher position and not getting it for good reason, because I never was a teacher. Eventually, we did find a head teacher who was perfect for our team and really brought us all together in a way that just felt really cohesive and exciting. And around those times, the state of New Mexico passed licensure for therapists. And because of the years of experience I'd had in Illinois as a therapist and the 6 months in New Mexico, I was eligible to apply for my professional license as a marriage and family therapist and join, get grandfathered in and join in the licensure program that began in the 90s here in New Mexico. Once I had my independent license, I could return to work. I worked at a New Day shelters and family services in their home-based program with their juvenile justice program. That program was a team approach to helping families where they had kids who had been arrested for whatever reason figure out what they need to do different to keep this kid out of jail and keep him on the road to a better life and career. So the families who agreed to participate in this program invited a home-based therapist who would be me and a juvenile justice officer who had some special privileges to be able to get those kids' attention about whether they were compliant with their probation agreement and a mentor who helped a kid find other things to do besides what they were doing that got them into trouble in the first place, if you know what I mean. So that restorative justice approach worked right there with that juvenile justice program where we were trying to catch kids early with their family involvement and include them in changing the direction that those kids were going to make. So looking back over the years, when I was 18 years old and James Hill was arrested for pulled out of high school for the assault against me, I would really rather have a program like this available for somebody like him because that was his first offense, and he could have turned his life around if a program like this was available for him. So here I was here in New Mexico in Albuquerque trying to do for those kids what wasn't available for the person who hurt me. So that was the next chapter of my journey, evolution of restorative justice in terms of the work that I did. Um, After my second tubal pregnancy, we also tried to adopt from a special needs agency. Again, one of those attempts, working with so many kids that have been in the foster care system. I hoped to adopt kids like a pair of siblings that had been taken away from their families or who parents had died or something like that, so that we could start a family with kids who were already connected to each other. But unfortunately, because of my husband's depression, despite the fact that I had a master's degree and was working on a PhD in family studies and child development, the home study indicated that if we were to adopt a kid with some attachment issues, it would destroy our marriage. And after I look back over the years of the relationship my husband had with other kids that had attachment issue, I could see that she was right, but at the time I was just devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I had no idea why I was working so hard to make the world a better place, to provide families a safer environment for children. I wanted to create that in my own home. And here I was, I'd lost four pregnancies. Two of them were tubal pregnancies and tried to adopt and got turned down. And after 10 years of trying, I was still struggling to create a family of my own.
Goodness. Well, I appreciate you sharing all this with us and really all this that you went through. You're helping so many with your strength to create a better world. And amazing. Little did you know that during these years, as you mentioned, the older assailant, right, was seeking his own release from prison, which is a whole nother story. If we have time for that, if you're ready to move on yet.
Mhm. Well, I think what I saw in my criminal justice case was that my own understanding of the 12 steps, how to change the habits in my own
Mhm.
life, and learn how to rely on a higher power to guide me, helped me to really to turn my faith over. Um, and I remember as getting a child, when I was going through this issue with trying to adopt, I received a journal, an empty journal, during as a gift. And I began writing letters to my child, not knowing where my child was going to come from, inviting him into my life, whether he was coming through adoption or whether he was coming through in vitro or whether he was coming with the old-fashioned way. And I continued to write and write letters to him until eventually we did try in vitro fertilization and instead of adoption, and the path to becoming a parent opened up to us. The first time I went to go visit the second time, it was actually the second visit I had with the doctor. They told me I was the perfect candidate for
Oh,
a study that would pay for most of the services or the most of the medical care involved in vitro fertilization. And I immediately, signed up for that study that helped me to conceive my son significantly less expensive than it would have been if I had to pay out of pocket. So that's really that turn of events in terms of my faith and knowing that I could turn to my higher power to help me become a parent, even after all that struggle, was really worth it.
oh my goodness. Well, thank you for that. And letting people know there's possibility, there's hope, and however, you decide to start a family. Someone who couldn't get pregnant myself, I had to go through multiple IVF treatments. I really can empathize with a lot of what you're saying, a lot of your struggles, and I think so many women really can. And wow, not an easy task to get through, right? And we try our best. And, oh my goodness. Well, I know. Do you want to talk a little bit more about maybe
So,
the in
so this period of, go ahead.
oh no, the Innocence Project? Thanks.
Yes. So during this time, so between 1990, when I first got pregnant and decided to move to New Mexico, and 2001, when I went through the 2000 is when I went through the in vitro fertilization for my son. During that time in 1996, I didn't know it because this was kind of happening in the background. The Innocence Project, which was based out of Chicago, Illinois, accepted the second assailant's case in 1996. The Innocence Project is a group of lawyers that represent people who've been wrongfully imprisoned and bring evidence forth to demonstrate that there has been some mishandling of the case in order to free the criminals from prison. Now, if you look at the legal system that we have right now, this is really, once you've been convicted of a crime, this is really the only path to get out, other than the day for day good
Yeah.
behavior that Hill got out on. Now, Hill did come to me asking for that letter of support for an early release. So when he was up for parole, even before he had completed his sentence, that because he hadn't gotten treatment for what he was in there for, I really wasn't willing to do this. So Mays came to the
Oh,
Innocence Project asking them to examine the kit that was
wow.
collected
Collected. Mm-hmm.
on the night of my assault, which, by the way, today is October 6th, 2025.
Mm.
So yesterday is the 45-year anniversary of the day of the assault. So he petitioned the Illinois State Supreme Court to uncover the rape kit. And after several months of searching for it, one of the interns who worked in the court clerk's office was able to find the rape kit that was associated with my case. And the rape kit was discovered, and the Innocent Project moved to have it preserved. And then it was tested to see if it matched.
Ah.
And it didn't match either of the men who had been convicted of the crime against me. So let me explain this to you.
Oh.
So the DNA in the rape kit that they found after searching for it for 2.5 months in storage after 20 years of it being in storage didn't match either of the people who assaulted me. What I heard later at the time when they contacted me about this was that there was DNA semen in the rape kit and it matched a white person. And they asked me if I remembered who I was, having sexual intercourse at the time when I was 18. And to be completely honest with you and with them, I didn't remember who on October 5th, 1980, 20 years later, I was in a relationship with, because to be honest, the trauma of that night kind of erased a lot of my relationship with time. So during this time that I was going through all this effort to try to have a baby and losing my babies and losing my pregnancies and trying to adopt and getting turned down, one of the men who was in prison for assaulting me was petitioning the Supreme Court to be released. And the DNA that was
Oh.
tested is now being used as evidence to show that maybe he really didn't do what he was convicted
Yeah.
of.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I don't know. I disagree with the idea that because the DNA didn't match, that he didn't commit the crime. It's kind of like saying if you didn't leave fingerprints, you weren't in the room,
Wow.
in my opinion. But this was the evidence by which the Mays used to petition the court system, the Supreme Court, to overturn his conviction. And the testing was done in 2001, which is the year that my son was born, which
Ah.
excluded Mays and Hill from the contributor of the semen in the rape kit.
Oh.
So that was going on in the background while I was going through my infertility journey.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing
It
that.
wasn't until after my son was born that I knew this was going on. I found out about it after my son was born, and we'll get into what happened next in our future stories. But
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this today. Please tell us
sure.
how we can contact you.
Okay. Well, for more information about the book and the podcast, visit myrelationshipwithoprah.com. And for information about psychotherapy services, lisajohnsonlmft.com, which is licensed marriage and family therapist, LMFT, lisajohnsonlmft.com.
Beautiful. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of
See
your day. All right. Thank you
you
again,
next
sweetheart.
week.
You got it.
All
Bye
right.
bye. Thanks.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.